Welcome everyone. We're going to be discussing in this little presentation Azure Blob storage in Kentico. Well, more specifically, any storage, because there's a lot of different options out there. Kentico has a couple default ways of storing its files. It has actually physically on your site in the folder structure. And there's also through attachments in the database where it stores binary data of files like page attachments and the like. And sometimes there comes a need to store these elsewhere, whether not in the database, not in the file system, but in an external system. Kentico has provided the capability to be able to hook up to things like Azure Blob Storage or Amazon AWS, or potentially even your own custom providers. But we're going to take a look at what it takes to take an existing site and put it into Azure Blob Storage for both its normal files, like the media files, and also its database files and system files. So we're going to start here with a blank Kentico site. And since we're going under the assumption that there's already some data here, I'm going to go ahead and upload some files, one into the media library. And I'll go ahead and put in just some text file. And we'll also go through the forms. So let's go to our forms, because you can have form attachments. Okay, and then also as a page attachment. So we'll go to our pages, and I'll pick my home page and put a new attachment. Okay, so these three files are now in here. When I take a look at my actual CMS folder, I'm going to see my blank site, which is the name of my site. And we have two folders. We have the media folder, which has my Azure Blob test, and that's going to be that media file that I just uploaded. We have biz forms, which is going to be for that form thing that I just put up. And of course, there is no attachment because that's actually in the database. So we have all these attachments. Now we want to hook up Azure to start utilizing these things. Well, Kentico makes it pretty easy to hook up to Azure. So first step is we need a place to put it in Azure. I have up here my Azure account. I'm going to go to New and type in storage. Oh, storage. Here's my storage accounts. I'm going to create a new one. Name of it will be TFAS Test Storage. I'm going to keep everything the same. It's going to be a general purpose storage. And you can do things like go to premium performance, a whole bunch of different things. We're not going to worry about that. I'm going to put on my subscription, and I will create a new resource group of TFAS Test Storage Resource Group. Sure. And it helps if I spell it correctly. We'll choose location. I'm going to go ahead and create this. So Azure is going to spin up a new storage account. And what Azure Storage is basically it's kind of like a big database that stores your physical binary files, blob storage. So now we have that. I'm going to take a look and find that. So I'll go to all my resources. Sometimes it takes a moment to show up on here, so just got to give it a couple seconds. There it is. Okay, so here's my storage account. Now we're going to need a couple things. First off, we actually need to make a container inside the storage account because you can have multiple containers within this. A container is where it's actually going to store its data. So I'm going to hit containers, new container, and I'll give it a name. So I'm going to call this TFAS Kentico 10 Blob. And the access type is going to be a container type. I'm going to go ahead and create that. So we're going to need to keep track of that name. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up a notepad and paste in my Kentico container name. We need to go to access keys, because now we'll also need to give access to our CMS. So I'm going to grab the storage account name and the key. Now, very important, make sure to click to copy, because I tried just selecting all uncopied and I missed some of it. So here's the full key then. Okay, so now we have the Azure storage account set. We have the access key, the name of it, and the container within it that we're going to then instigate. The next step is to go to our web.config and set these things up. Now, Kentico has two options for you in terms of Azure Blob Storage. Again, it can store just like your media files, which is the kind of the basic, but can also store the system files. And that's more than just the attachments. It's also things like your app data and a whole bunch of other files can be stored in Azure Blob. We're going to do both. However, you should reference the DevNet article on the Azure Blob storage account because if you don't want to do all of them, you don't need to do all these steps. I'll kind of highlight. But if you look at Azure Storage in the DevNet, you'll find the article for configuring Azure Storage, which gives all these instructions. So we need to add a couple web.config keys. So I'm going to go ahead and go to this one here, copy. So first is the CMS external storage name value equals Azure. This one is only if you're doing the full system files. This is a key for Kentico that says, okay, my app data stuff, all my attachments, all this stuff is going to be using Azure. The Azure account name, that's the account for your Blob storage. And then the access key, the Azure shared key, is what goes right in there. This will give the site access to be able to log into your Azure and permission to utilize and such. So that's the first step. Next step is we need to add in a new class into our app code. I'm putting it at the root, but you probably want to put this in a site-specific folder. You want to, actually, I'll do that so way. You want to keep things going to how Kentico puts it. So blank site. And then here we shall put in our new class. And we'll call this one the Azure Storage Provider. I'm going to copy and paste some code. It is on the DevNet article as well. I'm just going to kind of help explain a little bit. So first off, we have a CMS loader attribute. And what that means is this is going to load up when Kentico loads. You have the on-init override. So as soon as the Kentico instance starts up, this code is going to run. It's used for configuration. You can also use it for catching global events and things of that nature. Then we are calling a new storage provider of type Azure and of CMS Azure Storage. This media provider is then saying that anything that falls under my jurisdiction, we're going to be using the Azure keys, and it's going to be using this CMS Azure Storage class in order to figure out how to do its stuff. These are part of built-in Kentico, so I didn't build this one myself. Next, we have the custom root path. This is what we actually need to give our container name that we did in there. So our container was called tface Kentico 10 blob. I'm going to paste that in. Again, that's referencing not the storage account, but the actual container within it that we created, which is this guy right here. The public external folder object equals true allows it to make it public access, which we want to do. And lastly, the map storage path. This is saying that anything that's under the blank site folder, which is going to include our media and all the rest, you remember from here, this is all going to be included in that blob storage. Okay, so I'm going to save that. And I'm going to go ahead and reload my site. And then we got to do some settings changes next. Now while that's reloading, I'll take a look at this other code that I have in here. One thing, if you do map all the system files, Kentico highly recommends that you exclude the Smart Search and the Web Analytics, because things can mess up with not being able to delete the lock key, a whole bunch of different things. So what this does here is it's calling a new storage provider, like the one above, which this, without giving anything, is going to give the default Kentico provider. And then we're going to map these paths, the app data, CMS modules, web analytics, and the CMS module smart search to the default, which means that if I'm looking for anything in the app data, CMS modules, smart search, or web analytics, use the default Kentico file management instead of using Azure. So it kind of overrides those specific ones. Okay, so we're reloaded. Next, I'm going to go to settings because we need to tell the system to use the file structure. And also we're going to be pulling it down. So, and again, these steps are a little bit more specific to if you want to store system files, not necessarily the media files. So system, we're gonna go to files. And by default, it says store files in the database. We're gonna store it in the file system, so that way it will reference the file system, and then when it can't find it, it'll go to Azure. So I hit save. And then also for performance, we want to make sure that it will look to the file system first. So we're going to do redirect files to disk and hit save on that. So now we're going to be storing files in the file system, and it's going to look to the file system first because you can do both file and database. And when it doesn't find the file, it's going to look to Azure and then find it. This is how the process is going to go. Last step is that right now we have a couple files that are in the database still. Just because I flip that switch doesn't mean they get pulled down. So we need to go to the system, files, attachments. And here's that one attachment that was on my page. See, it's stored in database, yes, and stored in file system, no. We're going to copy to file system. Okay. And then lastly, we are going to delete from database. Okay, so now it exists only in the file system. Actually, I should have done that step earlier, but right now, because Azure's turned on, it automatically went straight to Azure. So I have right here the Microsoft Azure Storage Explorer. You can download it for free, and then you can actually connect to your Azure account. Here I have my storage accounts, and I should see in here the storage accounts. Refresh. And, oh, I put in the wrong one. One sec, I'm going to log out and log back in because it's not seeing my recent one. So let's go ahead and go to Connect Azure Storage, Azure, sign in. Okay, well, this one's not liking showing me, so I might have to just reference it through here. So here, through the Azure portal, we have the blank site, which is my site. You're going to see that there's a files, this folder here, and here's actually that file that was the attachment that we pulled down. But as you can see, we still have only that file. The existing files, the media file and the BizForm file, aren't there yet. Whenever you start activating Azure, it will only affect new files. So if I go to the media library, and I upload a new file, let's do, sure, that one. And you see the direct path now has this full link to Azure Blob Storage. And of course I can do the permanent link that would allow me to do a local one. And if I take a look at in my actual Blob Storage, if I refresh, now you see Media, Azure Blob Test, and there's my new folder. The same thing with the forms. So if I go to my forms, and I add a new record, put in a new document. Let's do my notes. You're going to notice that, again, there's nothing, that notes isn't found in here. That's just my other previous one. But if I go to the Azure Blob and I go up a level and hit refresh, oh, another level. Here's my BizForm files, and there's my new doc. So how do I take existing files then and get them up into Azure? Well, you actually have to upload the files to Azure, then you can delete them. So for instance, here in my BizForm files is that one text file, my first entry, that's not in Azure. I can upload that file, so let me go to it. C drive, web, blank site, BizForm files. So I will upload this. Okay, now it's in Azure. Now I can delete it from here. And if I go to my forms and I take a look at that first entry right here, I will still be able to get it because it says, oh, it's no longer in the file structure, it's up in Azure. And there we go. So if you have an existing site, the thing that you will need to remember is that you probably have to write a script, and I might write one of these up at some point and post it on the DevTrev blog. But to then go through these specific areas and manually upload them into your Azure in their correct spots. Because as long as you do that, then you're all set to go. And that's really all it takes. So flipping a couple switches, putting a couple web.configs, and then one class to be able to finish the configuration. And now you can utilize Azure Storage very quick and easy on your site. And with very little ramifications in terms of there's no real effect that it has on your site or anything like that. In fact, I believe if I take this one and I paste it into my Kentico 10. See? So even though this file doesn't actually 1 second, make sure that one. Oh, that does exist there. 1 sec. Let me upload it to Azure. Blank site. Media. Azure Blob test. Upload. Media. There you go. Upload. There we go. Now it's up on there. I believe if I delete it locally now. Oh, actually, so that is one catch that I forgot about. If you use relative links onto your site, then I do not believe it will find that because it's still looking to you have to use the permanent links. That's one thing you will need to be aware of though, is that any direct links to files though that aren't using the permanent links would be broken. Now there are some workarounds to this. So for instance, you see the direct path, it no longer works because the file actually doesn't exist in that direct path. If I use the get permanent link, it will still find the file properly. So some workarounds to this is that you can implement a custom 404 handler that would do a lookup to see if there is a file that has this path. And then if it does have this path, redirect them to the permanent link, which is the get media. That'd be one workaround. And otherwise, you can also run scripts to try to find the broken links, replace them out. But that'd probably be the methodology you want to use for these specific files. So if you have a lot that are using regular links, put in a custom provider, do a lookup in the CMS media file database, and you should be able to find the file and then find the GUID, and then do the get media GUID. So I won't have that here, but I'll probably have to do that at some point in time and share that. I thank you for your time. If there's any questions, you can always check out devtrev.com or hbs.net. Thank you very much.